Hey, Fever fans, welcome back to the Pacers Fever Show. I'm your host, Logan, and today we are talking about a huge win over the Dallas Wings. The Indiana Fever have taken control of their season in the last couple of games and have started to turn a corner as we head closer and closer to the All-Star break, which will be coming up this weekend. It will start on Friday evening. So we're preparing to get into a part of the season where we celebrate those that have played well throughout the year. We get to see Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, and Kelsey Mitchell celebrated in Indianapolis as All-Stars. And then we head towards the second half of the season where the Indiana Fever are hoping they can really make a push towards the top of the standings in the WNBA. And right now we are sitting pretty as we have won 2 games in a row, and the Fever look to be going into the All-Star break over 500, and they have 2 games left to do so. The Fever win this game 102-83 over Paige Becker's Dallas Wings team, and it was a really good first quarter, back and forth. Wings had control of the first quarter for quite a bit, and then the Fever come back and end up playing really well and grabbing the lead at the end of the first quarter, 28-27 at the end of the first. And then in the second quarter, the Fever, which would be the story for the rest of the game, really clamped down on the defensive end, causing the Wings all sorts of trouble. And the Fever grabbed control there, having a 36-point quarter and beating the Dallas Wings by 21 in the second. The Fever score a franchise high in this game in the first half on really efficient shooting that we're going to talk about. And that was the big difference in this game, was just how well Indiana shot from the field and Dallas just never being able to recover. But that first half was very impressive to watch. We had just done a preview episode where we talked about the Fever getting out and running, scoring in transition, getting out to play their pace, and then hitting their shots when they're open, because Dallas was very depleted and is a depleted team, playing with a lot of inexperienced players. Paige Becker's having to try to navigate the very rough waters that the Wings are currently sitting in, as some of their key players missed this game and will miss some time coming up. But Indiana scored 64 in the first half, which is a franchise high, and that ultimately sealed the deal, as the Fever never let the Wings get close to them in the third, and then just closed out the fourth quarter. The Wings actually beat Indiana in the second half 41-38, but the second quarter run that the Fever went on was way too much for Dallas to handle, and Indiana got really effective shooting from all of their really good starting players, and Natasha Howard led that out with 8 and 9 for 18 points. Leah Boston 7 of 11, and she had 17 points. Kelsey Mitchell 8 of 12 with 20 points, and Lexi Hull 101 from the 3-point line had 3 points. Caitlin Clark, the least efficient of the bunch, but had a good game distributing the basketball. She had 14 points and 13 assists. Her big imprint was made on the defensive end today, and we talked about this in our preview episode yesterday, where we discussed how Caitlin Clark needed to step up defensively, and she'd been playing well defensively before her injuries and had made some improvements, but it did seem that she was conserving energy. And Stephanie White talked about this pregame with the crew for ABC and talked to Holly Rowe about the fact that Caitlin coming back from injury, there were a lot of concerns, obviously, about things lingering, and they didn't want these injuries to keep piling up. They want their star player, their point guard, the engine to this team, to be back and fully healthy. And to do that, they were going to be patient. They wanted to play her in a conservative way where the Fever weren't trying to push her past her limits, obviously trying to get back into game shape after missing about half of the games this season. That is very difficult to do. It's been on and off with Caitlin as far as her playing time is concerned because of the 2 injuries to the quad and the groin. She's just not been able to find any kind of consistency in playing time. And then when she gets back, she's having to navigate this offense that she is still learning how to really play with some of these players. I mean, she's only played half a season so far, and that being said, around 9 to 10 games. And in fact, let me look up exactly how many games, because I think it's right around the 10 to 11 mark now. 11. She's not played 11 games. And only 11 games with Natasha Howard. Sophie Cunningham now has to share time with Ari McDonald. And there's times where she's out there with Dantas playing in different positions. And I think that there's a lot of different pieces that are moving around that the Fever are finally starting to get some footing underneath them. And I believe as the games go on, this is going to become a better team, a well rounded team. And I think the biggest difference that I've noticed in the games that the Fever have won and games that they've played well, I mean, if you go back to that Minnesota Lynx team that they bounced the New York Liberty, in those games, there were moments, and especially against the Lynx, where this team has been so good defensively. And I was talking about this in last episode with one of the YouTube commenters that the Fever really needed to take that step heading in from last season into this season, becoming a better defensive team all around because the other teams were taking advantage of just how weak they were defensively. I think that comes with the youth that the Fever have, but I also believe that there was just not an emphasis on the defensive end and that coaching staff last year. This year, January comes in and has really changed the way that they mentality defensively. I think that they've played a lot better, and they're a top five defense in the WNBA. And it showed in this game against Dallas. It's shown in different games that they've won against really good teams this year on the road as well. I think it if the Fever are playing well defensively, they're a very difficult team to beat because they're one of the better offensive teams in this league. And their defense oftentimes leads into what the Fever want to do and what their game plan is. Early in the season, Stephanie White has been very adamant about the fact that they want to pressure the basketball, force teams to make tough decisions, turn the other team over, score on turnovers, score in transition, and I feel that the Fever are really starting to buy into this. And I think that the more that this season goes on, the better that they're going to become as a unit defensively. Because while the offense, you need consistency, you need that repetition, you also need it on the defensive side. And I actually think the defensive side is can be more difficult, proves to be more difficult because it requires more focus. It requires you to be completely locked in. And the other thing it does is you've got to know who you're out there with, especially defensively, because you've got to be able to communicate with those players. You know their tendencies, you know where you need to help. I think a lot of it is defensively is reading other players on your team, reading their areas of weakness, reading where you might need to throw some help coverage, where you could throw some double teams, how you can help out defending the paint, not allowing them to get inside. And it's just I think there's so many moving components as far as the defense is concerned. And while yes, I know the offense side has that, I do believe that defense is much more about playing together and doing so as a unit and helping one another, getting through screens, fighting through screens, and really just being intentional about the intensity that you have and being able to defend some of these players as they've played some really talented guards on the perimeter, some really great bigs in this league. And I think that you have seen them progress game by game. And they mentioned this on the ABC broadcast is that early on in the season you could still see where the holes were in their defensive schemes. Now you're starting to see exactly what Stephanie White envisioned with her defense and with that coaching staff in behind her. I think the Januaries do a nice job of really identifying some of the weaknesses on some of these other teams. And in this game, when you've got somebody like Paige Beckers who she's going to shoulder a lot of the offensive responsibility. There's many things that you can do to limit and mitigate any kind of success that she has by clamping down on her and making the other options beat you. And because she doesn't have the really good options in and around her that can create off or on the ball, distributing the basketball, getting into the paint, getting into ISO, and really getting into dangerous spots. Paige doesn't really have that option where she's got that big two option that can really take you into difficult situations, especially with the players that have been injured on that team. They're just not as deep. They cannot run with Indiana. And when you're missing people like Ty Harris, Dejanay Carrington, Maddie Segrist, that's a big uh, that's a big deficit that they're already having to try to pull themselves out of. And then when you've got Arike, who just came back from injury, who goes over 10, the options become very limited. And that's why you see Lee Yuru have the game that she had. And she's a good offensive player. I don't believe, is quite the second option yet. Could she get there? I think she's got the talent to be a very effective scorer. Her size, her ability to finish in and around the rim, and the way that she changes games defensively, I think that she is a good player. And as she matures, she's going to become an even better player, somebody that they can rely on. But right now, so much of the onus is put on Paige, and Paige is a good offensive player. But when the defense really starts to lock in on one specific player and you don't have the other options around them that kind of make them a threatening option going forward, you can focus on one player, and that's what they did with Paige. Paige had 4 turnovers in this game. She only had 4 assists. She shot the ball well, 9 of 15, 2 of 4 from the 3-point line. I thought she was good. But again, like I said, she's so limited in the things around her that it's difficult for them, especially with the Fever shooting the way that they shot tonight. Um, it's tough to defend that. So a big win for the Fever. They needed this. They get back to 500 at home, which is really big for the Fever. And I think that, anytime that you have a 5-game home stretch, you really want to capitalize and make sure that, they're 7-6, I believe, at home. They just changed the records, and I read the wrong thing because I'm recording this right after the game. So 7-6 at home, over 500 in their overall standings, and at home now they are 7-6 at home, 11-10 on the season, and they currently sit in the 6th spot, in behind the Atlanta Dream, who they just beat on Fridays. So 2 impressive wins back to back. The Fever have put together a back-to-back win, back-to-back wins for the first time in a little bit. The Fever, again, like we've talked about, we really want to start to see Indiana stack some wins because they've been put in a bit of a hole because of the injuries and everything that's happened this season. But it's been a roller coaster. So their last 2 wins were against this Dallas team in Dallas and Vegas. Then they go and drop games at home against the Sparks in Golden State, and that's just, when you're trying to make a playoff push, when you're trying to make a way up into the standings and try to climb out of this deficit. 2 losses back to back at home in a 5-game homestand can be very difficult to swallow. I think in this scenario, really needed them to come out 4-1. They come out of that homestand 3-2. They beat a very good Atlanta team and a decent Las Vegas team. The Sparks have struggled, and then they lose to a good Golden State team, or a team that's played well in Golden State. Uh, I think a mixed bag. If you're talking about this 5-game homestand, they'll now head out to the East Coast and play Connecticut on Tuesday in Boston at TD Garden because they want a bigger venue for the arrival of Caitlin Clark. So they will move that game, and then they'll play a back-to-back game against the New York Liberty in Brooklyn at the Barclays Center at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday, July 16th. So a really quick turnaround, some travel. So you really want to try to get this win on Tuesday. I think the biggest missed opportunities were those Sparks and Golden State game. I think that Sparks game, especially because you give it up late. I think they go on a 6-0 run to close that out. You could have been 4-1 on this homestand, and you would take that every single day of the week, especially with Caitlin Clark out and then getting healthy and coming back healthy and trying to get her integrated back into the pace of play and just the regular season itself, and hoping that she can string together now games all the way to the end of the year. She's been in and out of the lineup, and it does seem that the groin is fine. Seems like the quad is fine. Now comes a busy part of the schedule when it comes to Caitlin, Aaliyah, and Kelsey. So you hope they kind of weather that storm. It's going to be a jam-packed weekend in Indianapolis. They'll be like the mayors of the city. Caitlin Clark will be asked to do all sorts of different things, different events, showing up to different halftime things and talking about things. And it'll just be insane. The amount of attention that will be on Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever players as they will host the All-Star game in Indianapolis at Cambridge. All sorts of different events over the All-Star weekend. They were pushing for her to try to play in the 3-point shooting contest. They'll announce who those are. The rising stars, I believe it was. So let's go. Actually, you know what? Let's go over All Star Weekend right here since we're already talking about it. So Saturday night, the game will be at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time on ABC, Disney Plus, and ESPN Plus at Cambridge Fieldhouse. Again, that's Saturday, July 19th. Team Clark versus Team Collier. Team Clark includes Aaliyah Boston, Sabrina Ionescu from the New York Liberty, Asia Wilson from Las Vegas, Satu Sabali from Phoenix, Kelsey Mitchell off the bench for Team Clark, Gabby Williams from Seattle, Sonia Citron from Washington, Kiki Irafin from Washington, Jackie Young from Vegas, Kayla Thornton from Golden State. Team Collier features Nafisa Collier, obviously, Brianna Stewart, Alicia Gray, Oguamike from Seattle, Paige Beckers from Dallas, Courtney Williams from Minnesota, Skylar Diggins from Seattle, Angel Reese from Chicago, Alyssa Thomas from Phoenix, Kelsey Plum from Los Angeles, and Ryan Howard from Atlanta. And those are the All Star teams. Then on the night before that, on Friday, the 3-point contest and the WNBA Skills Challenge presented by Panini will kick off at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN. So skills, 3-point, and all star. It's going to be a jam packed weekend. Like I said, Caitlin Clark will be. I think they do like a parade. They'll do like a red carpet. They'll do all sorts of fun events. Sydney Colson, they said on ESPN that she would be doing a stand up comedy thing for before, I think, with Kevin Hart, which is pretty awesome. So I can't wait to see video of that. Sydney Colson doing some stand up. I guess she's really into doing that. Every video I've ever seen of her interacting with the players and stuff pregame, she's a funny person. So I'm really interested to see what that's all about. I can't wait to see, and we'll have to break it down on the Pacers Fever show how good her stand up comedy segment went for the WNBA All-Star game. But an exciting time in Indianapolis. They hosted the NBA All-Star game a couple of years back. Tyrese Halliburton was the master of ceremonies there. He was in the All-Star game. He was going for MVP, but was it Giannis, I believe, that went off, and it ultimately ended up going the MVP trophy not to Tyrese Halliburton. I'm hoping like Caitlin or Aaliyah or Kelsey can get the WNBA All-Star Game MVP. I'm interested to see what that game is like. I know that they take it, I think, a little bit more serious than the men's side of things. The men's side of things ends up being more of an exhibition, where I've seen highlights of the WNBA All-Star Game, and it's a little bit more serious, I think. So I am fascinated to see what that's all about. Watch the 3-point shooting contest skills challenge and see how much hardware the Indiana Fever can bring home from All-Star Weekend, as they again will be the host for this year's event. But just talking more about this game again, Caitlin Clark showing why she is an All-Star, 5 steals, most in her career so far in WNBA. Aaliyah Boston and Stephanie White talked about this. Holly Rowe talked about it. The broadcast talked about it, where they really feel like Aaliyah is stepping into her own, not just as a scorer, but as a facilitator as well. She had multiple passes today that I felt were unbelievable passes that really broke down the defense. And when the defense collapses in on her, she's able to hit 3-point shooters like Kelsey Mitchell, like Sophie Cunningham, Lexi Hull, Caitlin Clark. It just opens up so much. Ari McDonald, like that ability to be able to just tear down a defense and really exploit what they're doing. They talked about what Aaliyah Boston is really focused on right now, and it is that facilitating side of it, where they think if she can take that to the next level, again, I mentioned this in my last episode, somebody that I think could be in the conversations of being one of the best players in this league. And Aaliyah is already a good distributor, but she's becoming great. And the more experience she gets under her belt, the better that she's going to become. And because she's got such a high basketball IQ, she makes great moves in and around the paint. She's got a great jump shot from about 10 to 15 feet out. And it makes her so dangerous because she's hard to read. She can take you off the dribble. They've watched video. They told, I think it's Ryan Russillo that was on the game. They told him and Holly Rowe that they were watching Nikola Jokic film because they think Aaliyah Boston has that similar capability to change the game as much as he does in the NBA side because of her ability to pass, to move, to distribute, to also handle the basketball, but also knock down shots from deep. It's it's a good comparison. I mean, she's got the body, she's got the smarts, she's got the passing ability. I think that she is skilled enough to be that kind of player where everything is it's like she's the axle, everything goes through her and she's what makes everything move. That synergy that they talk about, Stephanie White often talks about the synergy of the team, and it needs to be better. And I think it is getting better as more and more games are played by Caitlin Clark. And with a healthy squad, you're starting to see what this Fever team can be when they are healthy by these last couple of games. And the game against the Liberty, I keep going back to because I think that they are this high powered machine offensively. And again, much like their counterparts in that same building, the Pacers, their offensive game has always been great. Now it's about getting it to the point where their offense is great, their defense is even better, and their defense is what's creating their offense. And I think that's the next step that this Fever team has taken. And you see the conversations they had. Sophie Cunningham mic'd up for this game. So much of the conversation today from Sophie Cunningham was getting into them defensively, making them make those tough decisions, making Page work, making their offense work, because they know if we can get turnovers, if we can get out in the fast break, we can cause them problems in transition, scoring in transition, and being that elite team that the Fever can be. And again, they time and time again today, they really proved that they could be that kind of team against a Dallas team again that was um, understaffed. I guess is the best way to put it. They just don't have the type of depth to keep up with somebody like the Fever, and it really showed in this game tonight. Fever really took advantage of a young team, um, underwoman, I guess you could say, not undermanned, but kudos to Indiana for taking down the weaker opponent. Fever shot 51.9% from the field, 8 for 24 from 3, which was 33%. Free throws 73% from the free throw line, 14 of 19. Rebounds, they were even with the Wings, 33 to 33. Offensive boards, 11 for the Fever. And I thought Michaela Timpson was pretty good in that category. Lexi Hull, Sophie Cunningham, your typical characters that are in there fighting for offensive rebounds. 30 team assists, 11 steals. The Fever absolutely put the pressure on the Dallas Wings. The blocks, Wings had that advantage forward too. Total turnovers, 18 total turnovers for the Dallas Wings, only 9 for Indiana. Points conceded off of turnovers. There's the big difference, 23 points off of turnovers conceded by the Wings. So the Fever scored 23 points when they got turnovers, and they got 18 of them, and that was a big difference. Fast break points, Fever had the 2-point advantage there. The biggest thing here that I noticed that is not as typical with this Fever team, they had a 20-point margin when it came to points in the paint. The Fever outscored the Wings 58 to 38 in points in the paint, and that was all she wrote. It was a complete performance, a dominant performance from Indiana, a game that they very much needed, and now head out to the East Coast to play a very weak Connecticut Sun team that I believe they can beat, even though they are going on the road. You're taking Connecticut to Boston, so they're not playing in their home arena. I think you'll have even more Fever fans than Connecticut Sun fans. So a little bit of a chance here to really get back on the right track and put together your first 3-game win streak of the season, which feels like it's inevitable, feels like it's been a long time coming, and really, I think something that the Fever will focus on getting, because they should be able to grab a win there. And they've got 2 really tough games coming up as they will play the Liberty back to back. They do have a week or so in between, about a week in between because of the All-Star break, but you'll definitely want to capture as many wins as you can before you have to play the Liberty. And because they got 2 straight games against them, this is a crucial game for them before heading into the All-Star break. They've got 2 games left, Dallas, and then they play back-to-back Connecticut on Connecticut and New York Liberty. So it's going to be tough to win Wednesday night is what I'm saying. And that's that you'd at least like to go in the All-Star break a game over 500 and not uh, sitting below 500, which would be worst case scenario if they drop the next two games. We're right back into square one where this team just cannot find consistency to begin this first half of the season. So a lot of interesting storylines coming up with the Fever because, as I said, we're at the halfway mark, and the Fever are trying to make up ground that was missed with Caitlin Clark out with injury and just the inconsistency of the rotations. They finally seem to have their head on straight and able to now push forward. Looking at the standings in the number one spot, the Minnesota Lynx at 18-4. The number two spot, Phoenix Mercury, 14-6. The New York Liberty, 13-6. And the third spot. In the fourth spot, the Seattle Storm at 13-8. And the fifth spot, the Atlanta Dream at 12-8. The sixth spot is the Indiana Fever, 11-10. The seventh spot, Golden State Valkyries at 10-10. The eighth spot, Washington Mystics at 10-10. In the ninth place spot, the Las Vegas Aces at 10-11. The Chicago Sky in the was that the 11th spot? 11, 12, 13. No, the 10th spot, Chicago Sky 7-13. In the 11th spot, the Sparks at 6-14. In the 12th spot, the Dallas Wings at 6-16. And in last place, the Connecticut Sun at 3-17. I'm recording this on Sunday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern time, so there are games to be played tonight that I didn't factor in. This episode will be up on Monday morning, but I did want to factor in the fact that right now there are games going on. The Atlanta Dream are currently leading the New York Liberty 26-13. The Connecticut Sun play at 6 p.m. Eastern time against the Sparks. The Mystics play at 6 p.m. Eastern time against the Seattle Storm. So those games will not be accounted for in that standing or those standings that I just read off. But the Fever sitting in that fifth spot, starting to make a push. I think winning another game, you really start to push some pressure on, and you look to try to close that gap between you and the Dream and then catch up to the other three. It'll be a really tough stretch coming up for the Fever. We'll look ahead at the end of the episode as far as the schedule is concerned. So I do want to talk a little bit here about the Connecticut Sun game coming up. Again, that will be Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern time on ESPN at TD Garden in Boston. The Connecticut Sun come in as the worst team in the WNBA, and they don't have scoring. They don't have a complete team. This team is complete rebuild mode, and I think they're going to shed some pieces at some point. They're in a really tough spot at 3-17. I mean, you already know your season's over. You already know you're pretty much solidified that first round pick. So they will be making the first round pick probably in that WNBA draft coming up, or at least we'll have a top overall pick and they can start to rebuild. But this team is just in shambles. And then Marina Mabry goes down with a knee injury. She'll miss the game against the Fever and is somebody that they rely heavily on to provide scoring spark, because outside of that, Tina Charles is the only other player on their roster that averages over 10 plus points per game. Tina Charles averages 15.7 points per game. The next, outside of Mabry and Charles, who both average over 15 points a game, is Olivia Nelson-Udoda, who averages 8.9 points per game. They just don't have scorers. They don't have really good starting options. They don't have really good role players as far as like getting you buckets. They've got good defensive intensity kind of players. They've got JC Sheldon, who, if you will remember, the Fever and the Sun, the last time they played, this was when they got into that really heated exchange. Sophie Cunningham ended up getting tossed. Marina Mabry should have been tossed. I can't remember. Maybe did Sophie? I want to say Sophie did get ejected. JC didn't, or maybe JC did as well. But there are a lot of technicals handed out, ejections. JC Sheldon has always had issue with Caitlin Clark, the enforcer, and Sophie Cunningham took to Marina Mabry and JC Sheldon and imposed her will on them. And Sophie's playing a lot better now. I mean, scoring wise and really involved in the defensive end. So this should be a heated game. Marina Mabry, again, will miss that game, according to the injury report. They said on July 11th that she'd miss at least 3 more games. So that does not put her in a good spot to play in this one. So they'll rely heavily on Tina Charles. Sanaya Rivers has stepped into a starting rotation spot, and she's been good. Jalen Brown had a really good game against them last time. That she was the one that was with the Fever in the preseason camp, and in the preseason she was cut by the Fever, and she had a good game last time out against Indiana. But Indiana did win that last game, 88-71. It was a blowout when the whole Sophie Cunningham thing happened. Tina Charles had 20 points. Udoka had 14 points. And Jalen Brown 13 off the bench. Those were your top 3 scorers for the Connecticut Sun. For the Fever, Caitlin Clark had 20 points. Kelsey Mitchell 17. Natasha Howard 16. Those were the top 3. Dantas played really well, had 13 off the bench as well. And the Fever shot the basketball extremely well, 45% from the field, 42.3% from the three-point line, and 93.8% from the free throw line, 15 of 16. It was a really good game. It was, however, the start of really when Caitlin started to struggle. It was, I know a lot was said after, like, did that impact her, the physicality of that game, and kind of boils over. They lose to Golden State and Las Vegas back to back, as they went out to the West Coast, end up winning against the Storm, to kind of salvage that West Coast swing. But one of the tougher stretches of the season happened right after, happened right after that Connecticut Sun game. Caitlin ends up missing the West Coast trip. As far as just being consistent, she comes back as injured with a groin. It just was not a good stretch. Some people pointed to that game being like the turning point there. They get derailed, miss Caitlin for that homestand, a lot of that homestand. And then she's back now and playing better and starting to get her minutes back up. She's not completely 100% back into what she was. I'm not sure as far as health wise. I wouldn't speak on that, but I think that she's as close to 100% as possible health wise, because I'm not sure they would try to rush her out there. But it will be time for redemption, I guess, for Caitlin. I could see her having a big game in TD. I'm excited to see what that'll look like with a different team besides the Celtics playing there. I just think that'll be fascinating because that's a really big arena and a really nice arena. And the way that it kind of sits, it's almost like the fans are like sitting down on the floor with you. It's pretty cool. TD is. So that'll be a lot of fun. A lot of Caitlin Clark fans, I'm sure. Fever fans will travel well on the road, and especially fans in the East Coast that don't really get to see Caitlin play a whole ton will get to see her play at TD Garden on Tuesday. The Sun are coming off a loss to the Seattle Storm. The starters in that game for the Sun: Tina Charles, Olivia Nelson-Ododa, Bria Hartley, JC Sheldon, and Sanaya Rivers. Rivers had 12, Ododa had 10, and Tina Charles had 20. Layla Lacan had 10 off the bench. Those really are the players that you're going to have to watch in this game coming up. With Connecticut, they don't score a lot at all. They're the worst scoring team in the league, and by a long shot. I think it's by like 6 or 7 points on average, below the team in 12th. They average around 71 points per game, so you are going to be able to outscore them on most nights. And I think the way that the Fever have been playing defensively, this seems to be a really bad time to be heading up against the Fever with how much the Sun have struggled to score, as of late. I mean, if you look at their last 4 games, they've had 3 of those games, and they're 3 games that they've lost in the last 4, all under 70 points. They scored 63 in Minnesota on June 29th. They scored 68 at home against the Aces on July 6th. On July 9th, they played the Storm at Connecticut, where they scored 93. That was their only game over the 70-point mark. And then they played Seattle. That's a weird schedule. They played at home against Seattle on the 9th and flew all the way out to Seattle to play them on July 11th on Friday. And they score only 65 points. So not a good stretch. And they really struggle to find consistency, especially in scoring when Mabry's not at her best. And if Mabry's not at her best, they rely on Morrow or Charles, and it's been an up and down, but mostly down season for this Connecticut Sun team. It's just trying to find anybody and anyone to try to score and get their scoring averages up, but also just being competitive. And they're just not competitive in this league, and it's tough. They were on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Looks like 10. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, 10-game losing streak from June 8th to July 6th. They had lost 10 straight and have lost 11 of their last 12. So it's been tough sledding for Connecticut. I just don't see any way that they beat the Fever. And if you're talking about keys to the game, it's really just play your game and you should win. Defending them, I think you can keep them under 70. I think if you apply the pressure that the Fever applied today and on the game on Friday against Atlanta, I think if you play defense like you have in the last two games, you should be able to stifle this Connecticut Sun team that don't really have a lot of scoring options and force them to try to make the big plays, which they don't really seem to have players on this team that can make the big plays, which is their issue going into the season, as the season has gone on. They don't shoot a lot of three-pointers, so you don't really have to limit their three-point shooting. They're 12th worst, or I guess that's 12th worst team in the WNBA at three-point attempts, 19.6 points per three-pointers attempted per game. The Mystics are the only team below them, and the Mystics only attempt 16 point or three-pointers per game, which is crazy. They're also the worst three-point shooting team in the league percentage-wise. So three-pointers, you're not really going to have to worry about rebounding the basketball. They don't rebound. They're the worst team in that category as well. Rebounding, assists, they don't really share the ball as well. Don't really have that facilitator. 16.6 assists per game for the team that is last in the league. They are a really bad team turning the ball over. They're ninth in the league at 14.9. It just everything about this team is you obviously don't want to overlook them because that's when you get into these dangerous situations. And the Sun, one of the three wins came against the Fever at Indianapolis, so they have lost to this team this season. They did have Marina Mabry then, but the Fever have overlooked opponents like this before. You never want to get into that trap because this is kind of one of those trap games where you can just think all I have to do is show up to win. And that can oftentimes not be the case. You overlook an opponent, you sleep on them, and that's when they take advantage of you, and it ends up not being a good game and one that you'll want to remember when you look back on in the regular season and go, man, we should not have lost that game. But there's really just not a lot to talk about as a Connecticut Sun team. If you play the way that you've just been playing, I think three keys would be play to the pace you are, apply defensive pressure because they just don't have scoring, and again, that pace and knocking down your threes is going to be important. Get out in transition, run and score in transition because, again, they don't defend as well either. So all those things coming together, I think those are the three keys: pace, knock down your shots, hit your open threes, and also applying that defensive pressure to make them try to score because they just don't have prolific scorers on this roster. Looking ahead, like I said, Connecticut Sun, Tuesday, July 15th, ESPN, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, TD Garden. Wednesday, July 16th at New York Liberty, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time on CBS Sports Network at the Barclays Center. And then they have that break for the All-Star game, July 18th and 19th. Then Tuesday, July 22nd at New York Liberty, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN at the Barclays Center. Thursday, July 24th versus the Vegas Aces at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on Prime Video at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Then Sunday, July 27th at Chicago Sky, 3 p.m. Eastern Time on ABC and ESPN Plus on the United Center. And then Wednesday, the last game of July against the Mercury, 7 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN3 and Merc Plus, whatever that means. I think it's the Mercury's streaming platform, and then Cambridge Fieldhouse. And that will wrap up July. And August is a tough go. We'll get into August once we get closer, but these are two games that'll be anticipated. I wouldn't say highly anticipated because of the Connecticut game, but that Wednesday game to close out the All-Star break, the last game, I think, on national television before the All-Star break. against the Liberty will be a lot of fun. That's Wednesday, July 16th. So looking forward to that. You got some All-Stars going head-to-head, some teammates on the All-Star team going head-to-head, and Ionescu and the rest of the Fever players. So I am excited about All-Star break. We won't cover the All-Star break much at all. We won't really preview or talk about the game too much. We'll kind of recap it probably that last or the episode after the All-Star break where we just talk about their performances and what happens over All-Star weekend, but we're not going to make it an All-Star weekend specific episode. So we will be back after the All-Star break, but we've got 2 more games, so we'll have 2 more episodes at least. We're not going to preview the All-Star game either. So we will have 2 episodes before that All-Star break, and that will be recapping the Connecticut game and the New York game. So be looking out for that. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you've gotten this far in the episode, if you're on Spotify or Apple, if you can give us 5 stars or rate us over there, it helps people find us. Comment what you like, what you dislike, some changes that we can make to the show. Also over on YouTube, like, subscribe, comment, share. What are your thoughts on this big win for the Fever and over the Wings? How do you think that the Fever will fare against the Connecticut Sun? What are you looking forward to most in All-Star Weekend? Drop those comments there. And we're also over on socials at the Pacers Fever Show. You can find us mostly on X is where I post mid-game thoughts and things like that. But again, thank you for listening. Thanks for watching. We will see you next time when we are recapping the Indiana Fever game versus the Connecticut